Hello there, friends, and welcome to another episode of the 360 Experience podcast. I'm your host, Tim Braheem, and I am really excited about today's episode with Jason Fleming. Jason Fleming is a client of mine and a friend and somebody who I have grown to really admire for multiple reasons. He started in the business in 2019 as a LOA, became a loan originator in 2020, and here we are just 6 years later. And he is about to be at, roughly $20 million in funded loan production through the first quarter of this year. So he's on track to do between 50 and 60 million, which is just outstanding numbers in this market. And you're going to understand why. I mean, this is a man who is incredibly intentional in the way that he goes about his business. He has his priorities in order, which is client first. He is an absolute student of financial advice, and that will become very clear, and not only in the way that he consults with the client, which we'll talk about, but also in the way that he uses that to pursue relationships with financial advisors. Speaking of which, that part's going to come probably 60% of the way through this episode when we talk about financial advisors, and you absolutely don't want to miss that part. So hang in there, because that is absolute money, what he talks about. He's also an incredibly giving man and somebody who is brave and willing to look at himself and to really put in the time to grow as a human being. And you're going to hear all of that in this conversation with Jason Fleming. Now, if you are a subscriber to this show, thank you. If you like the episode, please give us a like. If there's somebody that you think would benefit from listening to this episode, please forward it on to them. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Comments, likes, all those types of things are really valuable to us. And before we get going with my conversation with Jason Fleming, I want to make sure that you know about the event that is coming up in a couple of weeks in Las Vegas, Nevada, that I am the MC and one of the keynote speakers of, that so many of the Loan Atlas faculty will be speaking at, the Mastermind Summit. So let's make sure that you know about that. And then from there, we'll go into my conversation with Jason Fleming. Jace, what's happening, man?
I'm not too shabby. How about yourself?
I'm good. Welcome back from your producer's trip that you had in Cabo San Lucas with all of our friends. I'm glad that you had a good time there, and I want to get us started. I mean, I have no idea where this is going to go. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. I want to get us started with just giving a little bit of a history of your tenure in the business. I mean, you haven't been in the business that long, and I think it's super noteworthy, and I know you're a really humble guy, but I need you to kind of brag on what your year-to-date production units and volume is and kind of how that compares to maybe a couple of years ago, because you're really starting to take off. So tell us how you began and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I developed a little bit of an obsession with real estate long before I got into the business. Bought my first house in 2016. Was kind of what felt like very generic first-time home buyer. Like, I don't really know what I'm getting into, but I'm certain that owning real estate in the Pacific Northwest is a good idea. I'd just gotten out of a relationship. I had a very small budget, bought that first house, and I'll never forget James Adair, who I work with now, was my loan officer, and he reached out to me and told me the appraisal came in. And he told me it came in $12,000 over. And that was the start where I was like, so I got an $8,000 seller credit. Appraisal came in 12 over. I'm $20,000 richer than I was before this. And he was like, yeah, pretty close. And in my head, I was like, what the hell is everybody doing with their lives? Like, why is this not And so really kind of developed a little bit of a passion for it then, and kept in touch with James. We bought a few more houses over the next couple of years. And in 2019, I reached out to him, and we had coffee, and he thought it was just a like take your friend to work day. And I was like, no, I want to do this for a living. And so I started in May of 2019 as a loan officer assistant for James, making minimum wage. It was a job I was not good at. The LOA is like very task oriented. And he would tell me to do something, and I would ask about the client's story. And he was like, no, just call them, get them on my calendar. And I'm like, but why? And so that was the start. I did that I had hoped to do that for at least a year to get my feet under me because I wasn't great at that. And because I really had a passion for people's stories and really helping. James was like, get your license and let's just see what happens. So my first day as a commissioned loan officer was March of 2020. It was the exact same day that they closed our branch for COVID. And on the surface, like immediately I was like, what have I done? What have I done? In retrospect, it turned out to be an absolute gift. I was working in a branch that was full of people that had been around 12, 15 years. I had no confidence speaking in front of anybody. And so that was the start, that first 9 months of 2020. This year, we really started with a bang. I think the combo of having been around at least now a few years, building out some really deep partnerships with financial advisors and real estate agents, and our clients are, about 30% of our business is client referral and repeat client. And so we came out swinging. We put up almost $16 million in Q1. I think probably by the time this airs, we'll be at 20-ish. I think we'll be over 40, 45 loans probably by the time this comes out. So it's just been a really good start, and it's felt like the business hasn't felt that different. It's just felt like everything's firing on a little bit higher of a frequency. Kind of every year that we're around, our process gets a little bit better. My consultations get a little bit better. My ability to help, business partners grow their business and get buy-in and things like that. So felt like a really, really fortunate and to be honest, a little bit surprising of a Q1.
So I want to dive into a bunch of things, and congratulations on the success that you've had. And, we know each other quite well, and it's been really fun for me to watch you evolve and to not only see you evolve as a business person, but on your personal growth journey as well. Mitch, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later on, but on the client consult process and your affinity for knowing the story of the client, I'd like you to speak to that a little bit. I have to believe that for you to go from, I think when I met you a year and a half ago, close to 2 years ago, you were doing more like 4 loans a month. Now you're doing up to closer to 10 loans a month, which is tremendous trajectory. I want to get into how we scale that in a few minutes, but let's start by just talking about like the amount of focus that you put into knowing the client's story, connecting with the client, and how you present to them. Give us a little bit of a look behind the curtain on that.
Yeah. I think I'm fortunate. Again, I'll go back to when I started, right? Every other person in my office, it looked like money was falling out of the sky in 2020. And so I immediately wanted to leverage the thing that I had that I knew nobody else had, which was time. And so I kind of came up with an offering on my own that was really client focused and education focused and really deep in hand holding and question answering and things like that. I'm also really fortunate. You know this. I'm a numbers guy, but I married a therapist. So my listening skills are better than they had ever been. Really recognizing that for 90% of the population, buying a house is terrifying, and being able to kind of stand in that space with people was something that I recognized really early on. So a lot of it came right from the get-go, where we decided that we would book an hour consultation with every human being that somebody thought we should talk to. Tried to keep and again, like early on, if you don't have any clients, you don't have a really high bar for what your time is worth. I've gotten better. You're somebody that's helped me with that. But early on, it was just a real focus on trying to get to know people well enough to be able to give them great advice. I can't give you targeted, specific advice about how to finance real estate. how to build your wealth, how to protect your family if I don't know any of those things. So we started the 1 hour Zoom for any person that got introduced to us, and it just really stuck. And I got really passionate about that. I really do enjoy that 1 hour. And so it meant I built a team sooner than most people would. I had more, support than most people would, because for the longest time, I felt like I couldn't win without that hour. And so we've really just leaned into that piece up until just recently. We've started to shorten that meeting. We're starting to offload some of the pieces that may not need to be me. I mean, to your point about scaling and Q1, we found some cracks doing 11 or 12 loans, and that included a couple of falling outs. So there were plenty of times where we had 20 or 25 in process with the team. And so, we found some cracks there, but just really trying to connect with people was the way that, and it also was a reflection of the agents that I met early on. The real estate agents that were really attracted to the way that we were doing business were people that were very emotionally intelligent. They were people that appreciated the amount of time I spent, whether someone may have been qualified or not. And I'll never forget, it was probably 6 months in, I got my first referral from someone who was wildly unqualified, right? Seven minutes into the conversation, I knew they weren't going to be able to get a loan. But about 2 weeks after the consultation, their uncle reached out and said, "Hey, you met with my nephew. He had nothing but great things to say. I don't know him probably as well financially as you do, and I would have never thought anybody would give him an hour of their time. I really respect that. I'm on the other end of the financial spectrum, and I want to repay the way that you treated him, and I'd love to see what it would look like to work with you."
What a great story that is. I love that story. It's like I can reflect back on my career, Jason, of so many examples of that where you don't really even know who you're talking to. Who that person knows and who that person may ultimately introduce you to. Or I remember times like talking to somebody that wanted like an $85,000 loan. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to make any money on this deal. And then the next thing you know, like I'm refining their grandfather's 4 rental properties, because I, just took the time to connect with that person and develop relationships. So what I'm hearing you say is that early on when you had time, because you weren't slammed, you chose to dive into one of the essential components of being a successful loan originator, because this business is a relationship business. And you said, I'm going to cultivate relationships. I'm going to bring to the table what I do have to offer, which is some wisdom and education on finance. So I want to kind of pin that right there. So 2 things, 2-part question. One is, how much time did you devote to learning this trade of being an originator and actually having something to offer of value in the way of wisdom, in the way of advice, in the way of consult? How did you go about cultivating that skill? Because so many loan originators skip that part, and then they wonder why they have call reluctance or their batting averages were low because they don't have a really good, sticky consultative process. And then second to that question is, what are some of the questions that you ask people to uncover the areas where you can connect with them more deeply and evoke the kind of compassion and empathy that you're talking about in that consult?
Yeah. On the financial piece, I was very fortunate. The branch that I started at was a branch that was rooted in value over price, right? You can never control being the cheapest. It's a recipe, for failure. And it was a branch that was built on that. And I still joke with my original branch manager that the day they brought me in for the intro, like the interview to be an LOA, he asked me what my wealth plan was. And I mean, me, I'm sometimes overly transparent. I said, I've never used the word wealth in a sentence. Like I was still at the phase where I was like, oh, that guy looks rich. And it was very, very clear early on in working for James that without that knowledge, I would never be successful in that particular system. So I was fortunate. They had a program. They had great offerings. Everybody there was willing to help me. The way I approached it was I've got a very addictive personality, and very fortunately that pans out well when there's something that I want to learn that I believe brings value to other people. So it was every minute of every day that I wasn't in front of a client, I was going through those modules. I was learning as much as I could. The next piece I think that really made me successful faster was, I sat in James's office as an LOA, and this was pre-COVID. So lots of phone calls, not many Zooms. And so while he was having those consultations, I could only hear half the conversation. So I spent the entire time making up what the client must have said to elicit that response from James. And then at the end of the call, I would ask and figure out how close I was, or I would say, hey, like, I can't for the life of me figure out what they said that made you say that. And so I got these at-bats, these mental reps in that experience. And then as I continued to learn more and went out on my own, I joined every Facebook group around money and finance and retirement and real estate that I could possibly find. And I tested my theories. I tested these points of, interest rate arbitrage, of most people put too much money down on any particular home, of should you buy a house if the mortgage is $1,000 more than your rent? And I took all of my knowledge and I would formulate an argument, and then I would go online and find a thread that matched it. And I would just go to town for, 18 months straight. Every time my wife looked at me, if I wasn't in my office, I was on the couch, just two finger, in it. And she was like, are you arguing with people about money online? I was like, I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. And it was because it felt like a really safe arena, right? Like these are these groups, just hundreds of topics. So even if I had been wrong, and I certainly was in some of these where people, we would really start digging into the math. And I used to upload bomb videos of me explaining topics just to prove points. And I knew if I was ever that wrong and I looked like a fool, 72 hours later, it'd be so far down, nobody would ever see it again. And I used that in lieu of having that many clients to be able to get at bats on. And I actually think it really, really sped up the process. So I just really attacked all of it. And I have a life story that goes really well, right? So, I've lived by myself since I was 16. At 27, I had catastrophic heart failure with no insurance. So my life now, when I sit down with clients, goes from that start at 16 to getting, I think it was about $340,000 in medical debt at 27 when I was making less than $50,000 a year with no insurance. I had a credit score that started with a 4. And, progressively over my career in real estate, we're a lot closer to the other end of the spectrum. So I've got personal experience with almost everyone. And so kind of to the second part of your question, I still adamantly believe that for most people, buying a house is terrifying on some level, whether it's you're a first-time home buyer and you just don't know what you don't know, or you're somebody who's maybe very successful and you're always worried if you've gotten too far out over your skis, or if you are really good at investing outside of real estate, is it foolish for you to jump into this arena? That there's a significant level of fear involved in most of these transactions. So my buyer consult kind of reflects that. So I believe there's probably, I always say 17. There's 17 reasons somebody should choose to work with me. But I also know that most clients probably only care about 2 or maybe 3. And so if I want my conversion to be better than 3 out of 17, I need to ask really good questions up front so that we only talk about the 3 things you care about. Because I might be really proud of some of the other ones, but if you don't care, there's 0 reason to beat you over the head with that value prop. And so right after the, tell me a little bit about your situation, again, a little bit client dependent, but often the very first question is, okay, so what's the scariest part about buying a home right now? And we, again, we're 7 minutes in and we're going deep on the fears that people have. It's good follow-up questions, right? When somebody tells you they're worried about their payment. Okay, well, if your payment had to be more than that, what would you have to give up in life that matters a lot? What's the fear? What would that take away from? And then you get to people's real motivations around, well, our jobs are really hard and our travel is more important to us on a yearly basis than our future financial situation. That's really good information to understand, is people thinking about, well, we think it's going to cost this much to get a house we want. We think our budget works like this. And so the first probably, again, 7 to 15 minutes, we go to, I think what probably feels like a real low point right off the bat, where you're just telling me all the reasons why you probably shouldn't buy a house. And then we follow that up with me having an opportunity to show that I've been listening. And I say, okay, we go back through all those fears and I say, but you booked this meeting, right? You met with Tim and Tim introduced you over. So we're here. How are you all walking out into all that fear? What's the motivation to actually get this done now? And that combo that normally lasts 20, 25 minutes generally gives me everything I need to know about what version of the value proposition is actually going to benefit them, is going to feel genuine, is going to feel helpful, and gives me a chance to just be really kind of authentic in, this is the way that I believe you all, should go about this. And this is how we show up in these transactions. And if that's something that feels like a good fit, then, we'd love to help.
So I heard a ton of different things in that brilliant answer that I want to unpack a little bit for the listener here. The first thing that I heard was that when I asked the question about how did you get wisdom? First of all, you got wisdom by working hard. You went out there and you sourced information in social media, and you sourced information that was provided to you by your company that would allow for you to have some degree of confidence in the value that you are going to be bringing to a dialogue. The originator that does not invest in their knowledge of the financial markets, of money in general, is an originator that typically has call reluctance. It makes it very, very difficult to sell yourself when deep down inside you know that you really aren't all that valuable. So you made yourself valuable by taking it upon yourself to get knowledge. You also had life experience to draw upon. And you also shadowed, which is, I think, a very important thing that we don't want to skip over. You shadowed another successful originator. You heard him on the phone over and over again, and I'm sure that you adopted some of his ways of explaining things and some of his scripting and some of the ways that he countered objections so you could accelerate yourself through the learning curve as expeditiously as possible. The other thing that I heard you say was that, and you didn't say it this way, but I think that this is a key thing to point out, is that you give your client in that initial consult what every single human being wants. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. They want to be seen. They don't want all of your value proposition being vomited all over them, in which case 75% of it doesn't even hit the bullseye for them. Yeah. You're very intentional about asking these two polarity questions of what's the fear? What is the worst case scenario here that you're worried about? And what's the motivation? Why are we here together? And from that place, you can then zero in a very pinpointed way with one of your 17 different value propositions and speak to something that you know will be of value to them, which is extremely smart. It's a very intellectual way to go about presenting yourself and adding value. And the best part about it is that it's actually what's best for the client. Yeah. So, I love, love, love all of that. What I want to do is I want to talk in a moment about your approach to financial advisors and cultivating relationships with them, and your approach to realtors. And I also want to go into artificial intelligence because I know that you're doing a lot of exciting things with that. But before we do, I want to take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor, the Loan Atlas, on what it is that they're doing right now to help loan originators in their business.
Why do you think it is that some originators are sitting around feeling depressed with empty pipelines, while others are having some of their best months ever and are more inspired than any time they've ever been in their career? You see, both types of originators are dealing with the same market challenges. The difference difference between the two is one of them has the information, the inspiration, and the implementation, the coaching they need to make sure that 2025 is better than 2024. And that's why the Loan Atlas exists, to help you accelerate your journey from wherever you are today to the success that you desire to be having, both in your business and in your life. We've brought together 19 of the industry's most giving and gifted faculty members to coach you, to help you see what you need in order to achieve that success. If you're ready for a mindset change, if you're ready to achieve the success that you desire in your business and life, click on the link in the description and schedule your complimentary success consultation today.
Okay, so let's start with financial advisors. That caught my ear. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how many do you work with? What's your approach in working with them? What do they want and need? Like, what have you learned in your pursuit of financial advisors, which is a great vertical to be pursuing because a lot less originators are going to that realm because they lack confidence that they could have an intelligent conversation.
Yeah. I started on financial advisors early on, and one of the people that I started working with really early on kind of helped me really understand. We were two people that had just gotten into our industries. We actually used to race cyclocross together in like a previous life. And he had a previous career as a teacher. I had my previous career. And so when we sat down to meet, very different than most of the meetings early on, right? Most of the meetings, I'm like, okay, I'm new. I've got to sound smart. I've got to be this. I've got to be that, right? Like tons of armor in that conversation when I would walk into that. Meanwhile, I meet with Steve and it's like, there's no pretense. Like, you used to be a teacher. I used to be, a manager of an outdoor store, right? Like, this is who we are. Like, tell me a little bit about what you do and how this looks. And again, the branch that I started at was very, very clear that if you could work with financial advisors, those would be clients that have already self-selected into the way that we do business. People always ask me, who's your ideal client? And my answer is very simple. It's the same every time. Anyone that values advice. That's who I want to talk to. Don't need to buy a house. Don't care. Need to figure out student loans. Great. Let's talk. But anybody that values advice is the client that I enjoy working with. And so when you work with and meet with financial advisors, those are already people that have self-selected into that. They are saying, there are people in different realms of industry that know way more than I do, and I'm willing to pay for that expertise. So I saw the value really early on. I was super intimidated. And it was probably part of the impetus in my just like never ending search to be able to be in any conversation, in any room, in any group of people. And when I walk away, people think, damn, that guy knows stuff I don't know. I'd like to keep him, I'd like to keep his contact info. I'd like to follow up with him. And that's my goal to this day. Whether I meet you in line at the food carts, like it takes me about 6 minutes to steer any conversation, wherever we are, whatever it started with, to real estate and money. And I wanted that to be true. So with financial advisors, the hardest part is...
But before you go there, sorry to interrupt, but how do you do that? It takes you 6 minutes to steer the conversation to finance and money. So how does that look? What do you do there? Yeah.
It kind of happens without me knowing it a lot of times. My wife is the first indication that I've kind of done that again, where I'll look over and she's kind of just smiling and shaking her head. But, a lot of times when we're out enjoying food, or we're attending some festival, or there's something happening. And it's pretty normal for me to like want to engage people that are out at these things. I spend so much of my life, in this box that I feel like when I get out, I really do want to talk to people and hear what's going on. And so, we're out and I'm asking you, oh my gosh, like this food, this thing is really good. Like, do you all live close by? Do you get to do this very often? And so that often starts it. If they say no and they live in another area, I normally have some experience or, know restaurants or something in that area if they're visiting from out of town, whatever. It's just it's, again, I think it's probably a little bit of a defense mechanism too. Like, this is the thing that I know the most about is money and real estate. And so it's also a little bit of a defense of letting the conversation go somewhere that I might not be as knowledgeable. I always joke that if it happens at school, at my daughter's school, I hope that somebody goes, hey, aren't you in mortgage? Great. Like, that's a conversation we can wade pretty deep into. I'm going to do just fine. If they start asking about invites to birthday parties, or did I see this, or did I see that, or they tell me their child's name, and it's not going to look good, right? I'm not going to show up as well in that interaction as I will if I kind of control the topic. I also think that we just don't talk about it enough. I don't think we talk about money enough as a culture. I don't think families talk about it enough. I think when I got into it, my real fear, and part of what drove my kind of obsessive nature about education around money was, gosh, like, if I ever want to help anybody other than a first-time home buyer buying a $350,000 house, I've really got to level up, because those people that are buying $750,000, $800,000, $1 million, $1.5 million are going to know so much more about money than I do. And I've been surprised that that's not always the case. And in our consultations and in the onboarding, like we do a lot of kind of budget checks and understanding around a question I often ask is, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being you have no idea and 10 being you know where every dollar goes. That is not an answer that's kind of symmetrical with income and net worth. Sometimes I think it's very asymmetrical, where if you don't have to worry about those things, you just don't know them. And so that was really surprising. I helped an actual brain surgeon buy a house probably 2.5 years ago. We met 3 or 4 times for consultations and questions, and I really enjoyed it. It felt a little bit like a really long job interview. He just had so many questions, and then you could tell he would go and spend the next week or two like vetting my answers and my advice, and then he would come back with more. And it was like, and again, like in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm never going to land this guy. If he finds a house, I'm never going to. 2 days after he went under contract, I'm very clear with my clients, like, I'm your guy until you go under contract. Unless something goes wrong and we need to relook at appraisal comes in low, there's some kind of issue that requires some like financial architecting, you're going to be with my team. They're in charge. I'm really good at the parts I'm really good at. Get out of the way for the rest of it. And so he said, hey, I want to make sure before I lose you during this transaction, I'm just curious, like, what would it look like if I wanted to have you be my financial advisor? And I'll never forget, I was like, this guy makes $60,000 a month, and I'm the most knowledgeable person. I'm the person that he would trust the most at this point to manage his family's money. And it was a very, again, that was pretty much halfway into my career. And that was a very, very eye-opening conversation that I don't think I'll ever forget. It just came to me completely out of left field. The way I was interpreting all of his questions and what felt like an interview process was just him being really eager to learn more.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting what you're talking about here, and I think this is super noteworthy, is that I think we can all falsely make the assumption that just because somebody has a lot of money that they're smart when it comes to money. And it's actually, to your point, oftentimes the opposite. We talked about this last week in Santa Fe at the Masters Retreat, and we masterminded on money and investing, and it was a very, very meaty and valuable mastermind for about an hour and 15 minutes. And one of the things that we talked about is that most people that have a lot of money because they're head down making the money, and then they don't really have any time and might not even be interested in studying what they can do with that money to leverage it and to be financially prudent with that money. One such example was, we're in a room, as you know who's in the room. We're in a room of, very well off, successful loan originators. And I just brought up the subject matter of my margin loan that I have with my Merrill Lynch account. And I recited the interest rate. We're talking about arbitrage and borrowing against it and investing in other things. And when I shared the rate, which was 4.75%, one of the people in the room immediately said, wait a minute, how do you have that rate? And then another person said, where'd you get that rate from? I don't know. That's the rate that I have. And then I got a text from one of the people who you work with and know very, very well. I just don't want to mention his name. He sent me a text like 2 days after the retreat and said, I owe you a big thank you. He said, you saved me 80 basis points on my margin loan. I picked up the phone. I called Merrill, who I have my investments with, and I asked him, why isn't my, and that's a perfect example. They lowered his rate. But had he not been informed, he's so head down in earning more money, he's not really even having the time to compare and see if he's got his investments lined up correctly, et cetera. And again, I know I said this already, but I want to say this again. What I'm hearing here from Jason Fleming that is so incredibly important is that he has devoted his time to being an expert at the very business that he's in. He's responsible for managing the liability side of the balance sheet for his clients. That's what you do as a loan originator. And he's taken that role very seriously and said, I'm going to educate myself on that and even on the asset side of the balance sheet so I can bring optimal value at point of sale to a client, create massive separation, and have a brain surgeon come to him and ask him if he could be their financial advisor. And it's another fantastic story. So I hijacked you. I want to just go back and just see, do you have any, like if I'm listening to this and I'm going, I want to pursue financial advisors, other than being smart enough to have an intelligent conversation with them and impress them, is there anything else that you would suggest? How do you source them? How do you get introduced to them?
Yeah.
What's that first meeting look like, et cetera?
Yeah. I would say, the big thing with financial advisors is the assumption is, and it's not incorrect, that financial advisors don't love mortgage guys, right? The idea is that I think real estate is the fastest way to grow your wealth, which isn't, untrue, but that's the belief, right? And that's why even early on, when I would hear other people attempt this, they were like, I don't know, like it feels like we're competing for the same bucket of money. And early on, I realized like that's not actually what I believe at all. I'm evangelical real estate, but not as the only avenue, not as the only bucket of money that people should have. So I think the biggest thing that you can do when you're meeting with financial advisors is be really clear. Hey, you're probably thinking, or your experience has probably been, I'm going to be honest, my goal in saving clients money is that it all goes to you, right? You cannot save your way to retirement anymore. You have to invest. And if we can team up, utilize some of my tech, utilize the fact that I probably meet with my clients at least as often as most financial advisors meet with theirs, we are twice as likely together to have a heads up that they might do something that doesn't benefit them in the future. And so part of it is just getting financial advisors to get their guard down. Every financial advisor that I've ever met with outside of that very first guy was an intro from my clients. So as a part of our onboarding, and then again during the annual financial review, we're asking, who helps you make decisions like this, right? Like that's one of the first questions in that initial consultation after clients have decided to work with us is, hey, our value prop starts now and it doesn't end until you don't have any mortgage debt. A part of that is that we want to put a team around you so that you never make another major financial decision in your life without somebody who specializes in that thing. So I'd like to just, set the stage and hear a little bit about who in your life currently helps you with things like this. And we go through, do you have a will? Do you have a CPA? Do you have a financial advisor? And if someone says yes, I say, you can often tell, definitely with CPA, but you can often tell when people say like, oh, it's a guy from Edward Jones. Like, that's not somebody I want an intro to. But when they go, no, it's Tim from such and such, and he's helped us with kind of every decision, and he's treated us the same way since we started when we only had $7 to invest, I want an intro. And they understand why. And a lot of times, if they're not clients yet, I'll wait. But we have a note and the team has a running list. And so what we often try and do is keep a running list of people that we want intros to. And because most financial advisors don't get referral business from mortgage guys, I learned really early on, if I take a meeting with you, I got a really good chance that it's going to go well. At a minimum, you're going to end that being like, okay, he's better than most of the mortgage guys I've talked to. but that's where it ends for most people. So what we often do is we keep this kind of like stable of people that we would really like to work with, and we don't take the meeting until I have an intro. So as soon as I have a client that answers, yes, we could really use somebody in our corner, we, in addition to buying the house, we have a feeling we're going to inherit X, Y, and Z. We don't even totally understand like what accounts it's coming in, et cetera, et cetera. So then we'll wait. And then I'll go back to the client who knew Tim, the financial advisor, and ask for the intro. Then I take the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, I say, Tim, like this went better than I could have ever dreamed. I've actually got a client right now that I think would be a perfect fit based on what we discussed today. Would you mind if I just went ahead and introed them to you? Game, set, match. Like when you can deliver, because it also gives me not a generic follow-up, right? Not 2 weeks later, hey, Tim, I really enjoyed our call. Did you catch the Dodger game? Right? It's, hey, do me a favor. Will you ping me after you meet with these clients? I'm really eager to hear how it goes. And when you share a client, you've also now got kind of a Trojan horse into that business where undoubtedly they're going to be asking questions about the plan that you're coming up with. What are you thinking for mortgage? And if the client says, hey, we really like Tim, then I'm going to bring Tim into this program, into the buyer consult. And I'm going to say, hey, we're looking at two options. One has them deploying X with a payment of Y. The other, it's here and here. You know, if you were going to weigh in, if we said, hey, you get your choice of 50 grand on day one or $350 a month for the next 30 years, which of those fits their profile better? And again, like when you bring somebody in, the FA needs to be the hero of the story on their side. So that's really been our focus.
I mean, if you didn't get a ton of value just now from that scripting, from that strategy, from the entire sequence, I'm so glad I circled back to that question. It was really strong, bro. Like, I mean, really, really strong. There's a lot to learn for the listener on all of that. I have a feeling this one will be rewound, but it's not an audio cassette tape, so it probably won't be rewound. I think somebody will scroll back a little bit and listen to that a few more times. Great job with that. Let's talk about artificial intelligence for a minute. What are you seeing with AI? What are you doing with AI? I mean, you know, the company that you work for is one of the leading, you know, at the leading edge of AI. Neo Home Loans is affiliated with Better. Yeah. I think everybody in the industry knows that Better is a lot of great AI tools. What are you using right now? Are you using, what platform do you use? What LLM? What strategies are you using to streamline your business and capture more business with AI?
Yeah. Because I'm so consultation heavy, like the lowest hanging fruit for us was how do we get that hour-long consult tightened up into really valuable headlines and insights for my team? And then how do we automate it? So, you know, it started with Otter, like having Otter in all of our meetings. And that's kind of like the first stage I think a lot of people are doing. What we've spent a lot of time with is creating custom agents in chat that are pulling out the information that I want the team to have. And it's ever evolving. So we started with that. We're using those same texts to be able to follow up with the agents. So I think one of the ways.
I want to slow you down for a second because I want to make sure that, I think I know what you're saying, but I'm not so sure that would be clear to the listener. To have the information that you would want your team to have. So like, what does that look like? I mean, you're talking about like a custom GPT. We have one in the Atlas as an example called Communication Pro. And I have a feeling that that's what you're talking about, which is the ability to extract from the dialogue that you had with the client, the pertinent information to then communicate to your team and your LOS. Is that right? Or
yeah,
make sure go in a little more granular detail with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it started by just like part of the reason I chose Otter was because it has kind of chat built in. And so at the end of a conversation, I could just jump in there and say, tell me every time we talked about money, or tell me this, or tell me that. And then so we just migrated that into a custom agent in chat where I got better questions. We had the team start contributing like, hey, when you get these notes, what's missing. And it just kind of evolved into, these are the series of questions that we need to ask of the hour-long consultation so that we don't step in it, right? Like for me, if I ask you what your greatest fear is and you tell me it's that I don't have enough cash to pull this off, I can never, ever, ever send you a loan estimate that has a number that's higher than that number. Otherwise, like, I'm a bigger ass than if I had not asked the question, right? Because you told me what your greatest fear was, and then I slapped you in the face with it. And so it's been that evolving piece of being able to, I mean, the coolest part about AI, right, is the way that it learns. And so to be able to ask those and then have that information so much more readily available, and then be able to have the team use it in sending follow-ups. So I have a person on my team who does just kind of lead and referral follow-up. And so she's using it a lot to pull out the most valuable pieces. The future state of where we're going at, Neo Powered by Better is that it will all live in one system. When we were in Cabo last week, we got to talk a little bit about kind of what that future state looks like. And it's, as somebody that's mildly intimidated by AI, it's kind of game changing. I think what ultimately will be possible as far as being able to take the thing that I'm really good at, which is having conversations with human beings, and have it translate into a mortgage application, a plan, a list of dreams and goals, like that it all. And so right now we're kind of using AI to pull all those pieces together and put them in a nice box. But the end state for us is that it all works together. And that it's able to be uploaded into the LOS so that there's context, right? If our conversation says you make $120,000 a year and you should only show $700 a month in debt, when the app comes in, I want my production partner to be able to see that right away and go, oh, they put their net income. This is not a file that doesn't work. This is a client that didn't understand the question. And so that has really shrunk the amount of time that we are in files for pre-approval and things like that. Our turn times are incredibly quick. So we're doing a lot on that. Better has provided, we have kind of a chat that's behind a firewall. So to be able to have self-employment documents looked at, we have listeners who've been on, Ed and Scott built a absolutely brilliant broker matchmaker that we all use, where you just tell it the client scenario and it goes through every broker relationship we have and makes a suggestion for that particular client. That's hours of research for my team, combing through guides and trying to figure things out like that. So one of the coolest things that's happening kind of in our, Neo Powered by Better is the amount of kind of like crowdsourcing that's going on, where people are building really, really incredible things that we can all use. And then, again, kind of the communication coach that's in Loan Atlas, like that's getting used very widely. There are a lot of people that are really working on, running their conversations through it, running communication through it. So, I mean, we're just trying to use AI in a way. The thing that feels safest for me in how I use AI is for things that don't need to be me, right? Like, how can I spend even more time face-to-face talking to people, and me and my team spend less time on things that could be done that don't need a heart, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let me give you an example of that. So you were just referring to the sales and scripting coach in the Atlas that I had numerous clients tell me last week in Santa Fe how valuable it is and how much they're using it, which is, you run objections, you upload your presentation calls, and it's giving you feedback trained on this faculty of terrific originators who are incredibly well scripted, and it's providing feedback on how to counter those objections. Separate to that, what you're talking about with Scott Negardo, that is the newest GPT that we've created, which is what we're calling Communication Pro. And I'm going to explain this, and then I want you to comment and tell me if there's anything that you are doing more than this. Is imagine if you recorded your session with a client with your plot, or you recorded in an Otter or whatever, or you just took out a recorder when you're done and you debriefed, here's what we talked about, here's what's important. But I think that you miss some important detail when you do it that way. Just recording the session's best. You upload that and it automatically generates three things. It generates notes of all of the pertinent information that you've trained it to look for, that you then copy into your LOS. So your team is incredibly well informed, which is the part that you just talked about. And you gave a great example about, like, don't ever send out a loan estimate that eclipses someone's greatest fear of how much they're going to have to come in with. Great example. The second thing that it does is it creates a summary email for the client. And it says, it was great to talk with you. I want to really make sure that I'm, expressing to you what I heard you say and that was important to you. And then it outlines that in a professionally written email. So you can just copy and paste, proofread it real quick and hit send. Okay. So now you're communicating with your client and they really know that you heard them. And then the third thing it does is it also creates an email that you can send to the referring partner, whether it be a realtor or the financial advisor, et cetera, strips out the personal financial information because that's not appropriate to share, but does share with the referral partner just the valuable information that was talked about, what's important to them, how many kids they have, all those kinds of things. So imagine just using AI intelligently. This is a perfect example of what you're talking about. I mean, these are all things that you used to have to do on your own. Communicate to your team through the LOS, send an email to the client, send an email to the referral partner, of which most loan officers just don't do any of them because they don't really like doing it and they want to go on and try to sell and get another client. Is there anything else that you are using that is in that family that we're talking about, or is that essentially what you're doing?
No, I mean, that's essentially it. And I think the big part that we've noticed, right? Like the hardest part about, being an originator is your pipeline, your business, your income. And so what happens is when you're really slow without AI, like you do those things, right? You're like, all right, team, pipeline's empty, like get back on our value prop to our agents. And then you ramp up and you get busy and they're like, hey, we like that. I didn't. And you're like, don't worry about it. We got 20 loans in the pipe. And so you end up with this. And I think the thing about
and for those of you listening and can't see his hands, he's talking. That's right. He's talking about kind of what I call the peak and valley system situation, where 1 month you fund 10, the next month you fund 2, because the month that you funded 10, you were doing all of these things, and you weren't originating for the next month because you were doing all these things.
Exactly.
Keep going.
And that's it's being able to deliver that. I think when I look across our partners and how much they value us being their preferred lender, it's the consistency of these things. It's that they get these emails, they get these follow-ups, they get these summaries, they get the value out of it, regardless of whether we're busy or not, because they've come to expect it. And we were absolutely not delivering on this and wouldn't deliver on this without the help of AI.
Great answer. Let's transition a little bit as we kind of come to the ninth inning or so of this conversation. So now I'm going to hit you with a little bit more of a personal question, which is, over the last couple of years, you've also been doing some work on yourself and really taking a look at, what might be your inner dialogue that's holding you back, what might be some of the beliefs that are not the healthiest beliefs that you're holding. And I know that you have uncovered some things and re-architected some things that have, I think, had an impact on not just your business, but most importantly, maybe just the overall experience of life. Would you like to share anything about that?
Yeah. It's funny. I've kind of been back in the work around this. Just recently, it's something that my wife and I talked a lot about in Cabo. Finally, just being the two of us, we kind of were able to talk about what the last couple of years have looked like. The biggest part for me has been very difficult to let go of the parts of myself that got me where I am. right? Like if statistically I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here because of my heart. I'm definitely not supposed to be in a career that your success is based on someone choosing you, when the biggest kind of like crack in my inner self is that people don't choose me, that I wasn't chosen by my parents, things like this. Those there's some real improbabilities there. And it's very hard for me, and I have some hypervigilance from living by myself at an early age. There are some things that the addictive personality, the willingness to outwork and feel like I need to outwork anyone and everyone so that I will be deserving of whatever comes of that. Things that you and I've talked about a lot, but accepting that those things served me really well when survival was the goal, right? Like that's how I got from 16 to 45. And, recognizing that that's not the same inner dialogue. It's not the same story. It's not the same skills that are ever going to allow me to actually thrive, to go from survive to thrive, to actually be able to enjoy this life that I've built.
Yeah, that's the key part, right? Like, I mean, if you continue with the thing that got you there, which is putting your own back against the wall and requiring max effort from yourself, when will there ever be any enjoyment to be had in the very thing that you've created, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been interesting, my wife, she hung the moon. I outkicked my coverage by a long shot. But her last 2 years have been extremely hard. We're in the process. We are 15 days away from adopting our foster son, which we're over the moon. But her experience for the last 2 years, being not just his mom, but being solely focused on helping him play catch up from the way that he came into the world as a medically fragile 3-pound kid with a feeding tube to where he is now. She's realizing that she developed some hypervigilance and that she was spending so much time trying to be his occupational therapist, his physical therapist, his speech therapist, trying to get him to these milestones, knowing how important it was, that she's now having a hard time with something that, again, I'm very familiar with, but going from that to being like, okay, we're past survive, we're in thrive, and now just being his mom. And that's been a real gift, because it's very easy for me to look across the table and say, babe, that part's over. Like, just let go of that. Like, just be his mom. Just be his mom. And meanwhile, if I have that conversation in a mirror, somebody would be like, you're not going to be homeless next month if you only do 2 loans. Like, just let go of that. You don't live in the same neighborhood you used to, like things like that. So it's been a really powerful experience to have the person that I respect most in the world have a microcosm in 2 years of my, kind of 29 years. But it's something that I'm constantly working on, right? I mean, I learned so much about myself in L360, conversations with you, the other coaches, the people that I've met through that, being able to really look at how do I change these stories? How do I change these dialogues? And how necessary is it for me to actually get where I want? Because, like, to your point, like, what's the point? If I outwork everybody, if I do 50 million this year, if I do 100 next year, like, if I can't enjoy it, why would I work this hard? And decoupling, production and how hard I work and how much I grind from my value, I think is something that our industry needs badly, is to be able to decouple our worth from our production. Yeah.
Did you by chance yet listen to the contemplation that I sent you?
I did. That's why I said armor earlier.
Yeah. So what I heard you describing in both yours and your wife's experience is trauma. So if we look at it through that lens, you experienced trauma when you're 16 years old. You experienced trauma when you're 27 years old. There's no doubt about that. I mean, both those were very big experiences. And your wife, in a lot of ways, has experienced trauma over the last couple of years in this intense process of adoption. And when we experience trauma, we adapt, right? Like we are very intelligent organisms, and we adapt to survival from that traumatic experience. And the key is to be able to then get some distance from it and watch ourselves adapting and ask ourselves the really important question, do I really need to do that? And that's what I'm really hearing you describe as a situation where she's adapting right now, and you're like, hey, you can actually just like relax and enjoy. We're in the thrive state, right? And same for you. But it's the organism is still running on the old experience that it had to adapt to from a survival state based upon the traumatic event that it had experienced. The other thing I just wanted to reflect is that, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, in my own personal context in particular. I'm 59 years old. I've been doing this work on myself for half my life now, or close to it. And I've come to the realization, and I've known this inherently, is that it doesn't end. And I'm pretty sure your wife would say the same thing, especially in the profession that she's in. It's like you're always working on yourself. There's always something to clear. There's always a new belief that needs to be adopted that is replacing an old belief that was inserted at a time when it needed to be inserted. So doing this work continually and just coming to the awareness that, I'm always going to be doing work on myself to really take a look at what my deprecating thoughts are, what my beliefs are that are holding me back. Yeah, it's a part of the human growth experience and a part of our evolution. The reality of it, and I really want to compliment you, is that some people, or a lot of people, are just even afraid to look inward. And you're not one of those people. And it was really a joy. I'll really remember, very much the experience at 1440. Yeah. And I know that was like a really big event for you to go through that. And you had some huge awarenesses there that I think have been really beneficial to you, but it took you being willing to look at that for you to be able to do anything with it. So great job.
Thank you. I think the other thing that I think, and I pray that will carry me through this kind of next stage is not, I want my kids to have a different inner voice than the one I have. That contemplation talked a lot about what the ways that true unconditional love show up, and what a just superpower that is if you felt that, and that you didn't develop the need to hide or perform at a really young age. Recognizing that that's driven an unfortunate amount of my life, and starting to see a little bit of it in my daughter, that I'm too close. I'm too close to creating the same voice in her that I have, with how hard I am on her and what I expect of her and things like that. And so the contemplation that you sent was just beautifully timed. As I come back from this trip and really focus on, she's such a beautiful reflecting pool for how I'm doing, in what level of performance I see from her, the difference in how much of her emotion she will share with my wife that she won't show me because she doesn't think that it's as okay with me. That I have a really hard time letting, again, because of my history, I have a really hard time letting people sit and be sad. I'm so uncomfortable letting people be in that place. I'm just so focused on moving through it, right? That you can't, if your back is against the wall and you're trying to survive, you can't just sit and be sad. You can't take 3 days to walk through the emotions and the sadness and move through it. You got it. It happened. I can't change it. And next. And that's not healthy. So yeah, it's the ongoing work is, I mean, I've been at it. I feel like I really started taking a hard look at myself at 23, and it, has ebbed and flowed, but yeah, it's never going to end.
Well, the allowing to feel the emotions that any of us experience is a part of the process of releasing them, and to try to move through them rapidly is the process of stuffing them. And when we stuff them, they're still inside of us, and we carry them with us, and they start to build up, and we start to make adaptive behavioral change that isn't necessarily always most healthy to deal with the unresolved emotions that we are carrying with us. So we'll end with a question that I ask all of my guests, and I think this is going to be a great one for you in particular because of your ability to be deep and reflective, and your story. So I'm really anxious to ask you this question. If we could turn back the clock in a time machine, and you and I could go back and sit down with 18-year-old Jason Fleming, and you in the present state with all of the wisdom and experience that you have could have a conversation with him, what advice would you give him?
I think if I could convey anything to 18-year-old me, it's that you're right where you're supposed to be, and you're not supposed to understand how it all goes together right now. When I look back at my life and where I am now, sitting here on this podcast with you, there is zero chance we're having this conversation if every single hard thing that I went through during that stretch didn't happen. There's just no way. I don't ever, without going $340,000 in medical debt, I don't ever develop an obsession for personal finance. If I didn't have somebody at the hospital 4 years into that debt when I called and said, "Hey, I got a new job. I want to pay the surgeons." That was my question. I had gotten that bill. It was the only bill I saved. Surgery was about $14,000. And I thought in my head, that's a damn good deal for 12 hours that saved my life. I want those guys to get paid. So when I got a new job and I had a little bit of money, I called. And the guy on the other end of the line said, "Man, I got to be honest, don't give us a dime." He was like, "You're 4 years in. If you give us one payment, every single person who's bought your debt is going to start calling. Keep your money. Get a secured credit card." It was the first time that advice changed my life by hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And so I think that's the thing I would want him to know, is that there is a plan, there is a path, and you'll wander further from it than you should at different points. But you're right where you're supposed to be, and the longer you strive to stay on that path, the more you'll understand it.
What a beautiful conversation that I had with you, my friend. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you, and I really value this time together. And I want to just say thank you for being here, and I'm really proud of you.
No, I'm
very, very proud of you.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. I think the absolute world of you. I really appreciate you having me on. Hopefully, listeners got something of value, but I just really appreciate it. I'd have this conversation even if we weren't recording it. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Likewise, and if they didn't get something from this conversation, it would only be because they weren't paying attention, because there's a ton of value in this conversation. So thank you so much, and thank you for listening to this episode of the 360 Experience podcast, dear friends, and we look forward to being back in a couple of weeks with another episode. I hope everyone has a productive week. Take care.